So after my first attempts at therapy failed, what I started to realise was that I wasn't a confirmed case. It wasn't like I'd been sent there by the court or by a social worker with a confirmation of what had actually happened, and quite simply I didn't have any real evidence, so I didn't know what to do. I was trying to work through things, think things through, work out what I was going to do, how I was going to do it. But last year my brother's wife decided to leave him. He had had therapy prior to that, and I understand the questions asked in therapy, and I spoke to him and asked him, like, when I ask you about thoughts to harm yourself or others, did you mention the fact that, you know, you are predatory, the way you behave, the way you are? Like, did you actually explain about how you have malicious intent to mentally, emotionally abuse people? He started getting upset. No, I didn't say anything about that. I was going on at him, and he broke down and said, I know if I told them the truth, I would never see the kids again. So right there, my brother knows how sick he is, he knows how crazy his thoughts are, he knows what he does, what he has done, what he will do, and how abusive he is for him to know that if he had told the truth, he'd never see his kids again. But anyway, when she left him, she's left the country. She's gone back to Brazil, took the kids with her so that they can be safe from him. He suddenly come back into my life, and he wanted something to do with me, so I realised there was a chance to somewhat play along and actually try to work with him. In the process of talking to him, I asked him to start looking into certain conditions and certain behaviours, and he started researching narcissism for himself. And then one day he phoned me and said, I found this kind of checklist, and it's a list of behaviours, and I'm going to print it off, I'll bring it round and go through it. So just list the behaviours. There's an abusive cycle, alienation, always and never statements, anger, baiting, belittling, condescending and patronising, blaming, bullying, cheating, chronic broken promises, denial, dissociation, domestic theft, emotional abuse, emotional blackmail, false accusations, favouritism and scapegoating, frivolous litigation, gaslighting, grooming, harassment, hoovers and hoovering, imposed isolation, impulsiveness, intimidation, invalidation, lack of conscience, low self-esteem, manipulation, masking, narcissism, neglect, normalisation, not my fault syndrome, no-win scenarios, objectification, parental alienation syndrome, pathological lying, proxy recruitment, ranking and comparing, raging violence and impulsive aggression, relationship hypervigilance, sabotage, scapegoating, selective memory and selective amnesia, self-aggrandizement, sense of entitlement, sexual objectification, shaming, stalking, targeted humour, mocking and sarcasm, testing, thought policing, threats, triangulation. That is quite a list. And my brother went through it, and he said, I'll be honest with you, I was going to tick the ones that I've done, but I decided it was easier just to cross out the ones I haven't. And the only one I haven't done to you is cheating. But if we was in a relationship, I guarantee you I would have cheated on you. So that's my brother for you. Nice guy, right? That's what I grew up with, 7 years older than me. That is the mind that I lived with. They are the problems that are listed that you can confirm. There's even more problems that aren't listed. But anyway, once he had done that, I said to him, can you give me some sort of a written statement? Because if I go there with a written statement, a confirmation from someone who's actually harmed me in some way, then maybe I can get the help that I need once I've got evidence. And he's put, I'll leave his name out for now, can confirm I have inflicted the behaviours not crossed out towards my brother. I have only recently become aware through researching narcissism that this is how I am. I am happy to be contacted in regards to this to confirm my actions. I was enabled in this process by my parents as there was willful neglect of my brother, that being me. I recognise as a family we hindered any progress to receive professional help. I see now with my own wife and children my actions and do not want my children to be in the same situation or for my wife through more stress. After reading this, I can no longer deny my actions. Signed, dated, printed, phone number, email address. Now, me telling medical professionals that I now have that level of evidence, I would have thought they'd want to investigate somewhat. But you know that no one's actually took this from me yet or read it. I've been through 6 people now. 6 different people I've seen in my process who could have, maybe even should have, looked at this and took it on board for what it is. And not one of them has. So even having that level of evidence is somewhat useless to me. But anyway, I decided I'm going to get the help now. I've got some evidence. And I recognise it's pointless going to the GP. If I do go to any GP, they're going to base everything on my records. That's then going to be all the negative, inaccurate labels I've got against me, which aren't really going to get me anywhere. So I went to the mental health unit to try and talk to some sort of a specialist, some kind of way of making progress and actually laying it out to someone who does understand. They've sent me over to the day hospital. The day hospital have put me on to assessment, brief treatment team. They refused to take a self-referral, told me to go back to the day hospital tell me to go to A&E. Go to there, get an assessment done, and explaining to them that I know I'm autistic, that I've got PTSD, and there are 2 of my problems that hinder me in my interactions and my ability to process and progress. Didn't want to accept any of that, didn't want to listen to that, but then asked me things like, are you depressed? To which I replied, as far as I know, depression is a medical condition. So if I can't tell you what medical conditions I have, and all you're able to judge me on is the notes you have, then is it in my notes that I'm depressed? But again, I'm being awkward then. But what is the reality? Am I allowed to self-diagnose or not? Because if I am, then listen to the fact that I'm autistic and I've got PTSD, or stop asking me to diagnose other things. But then they don't tell you the protocol and procedure, because then you can hold them to something. That's why they don't tell you protocol and procedure, because then you'll be able to hold them to something. And they want to be free to move in any direction, in any way. They want to be able to jump around and move from place to place, disorientate you. And they don't like the idea of you having the upper hand, as they see it. You know, you'd be in a position where you could tell them this is right or this is wrong. And they really don't want you to have that. It's plain and simple. But anyway, I then have to wait for all the assessments that have been taken there to then be assessed, hanging around because someone else has to check this and then other people have to check that, and then they finally decide that they're going to send me to the assessment and brief treatment team. So I was referred to the right place initially, but you know, they didn't want to listen. But now I go back to the hospital and then suddenly they're sending me there, and now it's all official, so they'll accept me. And again, I'm going into that situation with the awareness that I've got of what I actually understand about therapy, because in the process of trying to understand what's wrong with me for the years in between going to my GP and that first failed process and this new process, I've been taking action myself to try and fix myself, sort things out, work out how to sort things out. And they have a problem with you having any kind of knowledge or any understanding of how things should be or could be. It's a problem for them. I don't understand why. because I'm there and I can explain things to them more accurately, more properly, and then there's less need for so much investigation, which then saves time, gets to the point, and surely it's more progressive and more interactive if I can talk to them on their level, but it's really not what they want. But one of the things I realised, why it failed in CBT with the guy who was shouting at me and getting aggressive, is because of the way the process works. The only way any therapist will ever get anywhere with you is because you already have that within you. The process of them asking questions and taking information from you draws it from you. And then the therapist can write that down, they can analyse it, they can work it out, they can rearrange it, they can realign it, and then they can feed it back to you. And then they take the credit for being a genius when the fact is you, the patient, have done all the work in reality. So when the therapist isn't getting anything from you, or anything that satisfies what they want from you, they become frustrated because they're using all their techniques but getting nowhere. So they are failing to complete. And it's like anything, any situation where you fail to complete will cause you a level of distress. It will cause you a level of frustration. You know, you fail a test, like a driving test, anything, you fail an exam, it's failing to complete, and that has a negative effect on you. So the whole time the therapist is in a room with me, they are failing to complete. They believe that I'm being deliberately obstructive, so then they think they're being forced to fail to complete. They become more and more frustrated with me, and then they have to vent on me, which is exactly what happened with that therapist in CBT. Deny it if you want, but it makes logical sense. That's the thing you can't question with me, is the logic, the reality. Once you start putting the reality, the logic together, and you draw these nice straight lines of logic that go for all these different points, you can work out what's going on. You can understand the what, you can understand the why. Even if they lie, deny, cry, and refuse to talk to you, you can still work out what went on and why. And that's what people don't like about me, is my ability to function beyond their control. I don't see why they're doing what they're doing to have control, because surely the whole point is giving me control back in my life, if that's what the therapy is about. Put these signs up with "we care," "we respect," "we are inclusive." They're nice slogans, but it really don't matter if you're not going to stick to them. No, at what point do they really care if they're not actually listening or letting you exist? At what point are you then included? How are they respecting you if they dismiss everything you say? But they don't want to hear that logic, they don't want to hear that reality. But everything that they give back to you is just opposition. It's constantly like a constant opposition opposing what you say. Because when you start trying to actually line up what they're saying into a straight line of logic, it isn't a straight line of logic, because their first opposition is different to their second opposition, and it's just noises of opposition. They haven't actually disproved what you've said. They haven't removed what you've said. They'll disagree with it, they'll dispute it, they'll disrespect it, they'll try to discredit it, but it still stands. So as a simple example, you tell them that 2 plus 2 equals 4, and they say, no, it doesn't, it equals 5. You say, no, 2 plus 2 equals 4. They say, you're stupid for thinking that because it equals 5. And you see, it's this constant opposition. They disrespect you for it, they dispute it, they do everything they can to discredit it. But you know what? When you've stated facts, absolute statements of fact, reality and truth, they stand no matter what. But if they then don't take that on board and work with that, they're now refusing to let you exist in your own process. They're refusing to work with you. They're refusing to build an accurate construct of you. That is what they're failing to do. And what can you do when your therapist behaves that way? I don't honestly know. You can ask to speak to a manager. I don't know what service you can actually report problems to. There is no governing body that specifically is set up to help you and tell you what happens. It's like, most of you might have jobs in companies or you've worked somewhere before, and there'll be a sign somewhere telling you the protocol and procedure of what to do in a fire. It's clearly signposted, you know, what you do, who to phone, who to tell, what doors to close, what route to take, where to meet up. And it's right there and it's signposted and it's available to you, but you don't get that with healthcare. You definitely don't get it with mental health care. So then your only route to understanding what is meant to be happening is that person sitting opposite you. But if they think that you're withholding on them, they think that you're forcing them to fail to complete, and they're frustrated with you because they're failing to complete, and they're getting emotional and they're getting upset and they want some way to vent on you or to some extent harm you, because if you tell them, the fact you are not telling me this answer is harming me. I've got this space in my knowledge, this gap in my knowledge, and having this gap is eating away at my brain. And all I can do is jump to assumptions and conclusions, and if I do that I'll get another label, so can you just give me this information so that I can work with you? And they'll refuse. You answer all their questions. Every time you ask a question, they'll ask you more questions. It's like it's impossible for them to give a straight answer. They just won't do it. And there's no real reason for them to behave that way in all situations. You know, when you're talking and you was to ask a theoretical question or a philosophical question about something, then I can understand them then trying to find out what's behind that and this, that, the other. But when you're asking them a direct question for protocol and procedure, when you're asking them for direct information, when you request direct feedback from them, there is some requirement or responsibility for them to give that to you. You have a right to ask for it, you have a right to get an answer, and they have a responsibility to answer. But then when they don't, they'll find some way to blame you for failing to interact. You know, it doesn't matter what extent of communication you go to, they will find a way to blame you. Change the time to a time that you know, they know that you can't make, and then say that you have failed for not attending. You know, you just literally can make it impossible for you. So anyone who is caring for someone or is responsible for someone, don't always blame that person for failing. Don't always look at them as not attending. Yeah, it might say that in their record, you know, that they didn't attend, but why didn't they attend? What is it that's actually going wrong in those sessions that means they're not able to attend? Is it genuinely that they're not trying to change? Is it genuinely that they're not making an effort? Is it actually genuinely their fault that they are unable to be in therapy? Or is it potentially the therapist? You know, whatever delusions you have that you uphold these people as perfect because they're therapists, they've got a degree, they've got a job title, you can't rely on the fact that they are perfect. You need to remove that from your mind, because there's potential that by telling someone to get medical help, they could come to further harm. And that is a reality. I know for a fact that is what happened to me. So you can deny it, you can say I'm crazy, you can say I'm just making up a story, you can say whatever you like, but I know reality. I've lived reality. This is my life, and that's what I'm telling you about. If it doesn't help you in any way, then oh well, but if it does, then I'm glad I could put something back. I'll follow up with more about the process of therapy that I'm still in.